What's the mood of the team and the coaching staff right now?
They're okay. Obviously everybody's disappointed, and that's what's to be expected. You sit there and you go through, and 2 straight weeks, when you feel like you're 2 or 3 plays away versus Western Michigan from having a win, and you're certainly one. You can pick one of any 20 plays. The game the other night. What you'd like to be able to do is come back and get right back to work and get started on Georgia Tech. Obviously, coming through and the weather being what it was, and us needing to shift our focus and make sure we take care of our players and make sure we take care of our staff with Hurricane Matthew, and being able to make sure that we take care of our own families and our own community didn't give us the opportunity to do that. So we got a chance to get back started up yesterday, and like anything else, the quicker we can get back on the field, kind of the better.
Aside from maybe the kicking game, it seemed like defense gives up over 500 yards, 350 on the ground to a team that was averaging 80. Mm-hmm. Offensively, weren't able to move the ball on the ground, especially when you needed to in the fourth quarter. 5 turnovers, 3 points. I know you've been hearing that over and over.
Sure.
The big question is, what do you do? Is it a quick fix? Is there something you see and you're like, this is what was wrong, or is it something that's going to take a while?
Well, I think some of it works in both ways. I don't know that everything is going to be able to get necessarily fixed overnight. Things that are fixed overnight sometimes are scheme issues. Obviously, there's things from a scheme standpoint that we can do differently. Obviously, there's things that we can do better. From a long-term standpoint of things that may not be able to be fixed overnight, are things that come down to experience. Sometimes they come down to being able to make adjustments a little bit sooner and things like that. As we sit there and go through it, like you said, certainly disappointed in our inability when we needed to be able to run the ball, running the ball. Certainly not feeling very comfortable about giving up as many rushing yards as we did. Positives to take from it, like you said, we have 5 takeaways, 4 on defense, 1 on special teams. But we got to be able to create points off of those things, and we've got to be able to get touchdowns to be able to go with it, not just field goals. So again, we have a lot that we can improve on those areas. And despite all those things, again, we're still 1 play away in one game, and we're 2 or 3 plays away in another one. And that's got to be the thing that we've got to focus on. We've got to be able to clean up the things that we're doing that are making mistakes that are hurting us, and those things sometimes they are, and you don't ever know when they're going to be. Is it this play or that play or this play or that play? You can easily pinpoint 2 or 3 that change the game versus Western Michigan. You can easily pinpoint 1 or 2 different plays in the game last week, and that's about how far we are away from playing a good football game against good football teams.
Well, you could say you avoided a lot of problems too. 5 turnovers, typically you could score a lot of points. That could have been a blowout.
Sure, particularly early on. We should have been able to, we should be. If you have 5 takeaways in a game and as many as we had early on, we should be able to sit there with a team that, at the time was 0-4, and you feel like you should be able to jump up and be able to sit there and crush your spirit, so to speak. And that's not what we did. And what we did was we let them hang around, and eventually they made one more play with us, and that's with 9 seconds left. First time they had to lead the whole game.
I guess a lot of people look at this and see, 5 of the most talented in the backfield between Kevin and Breida and L.A. and Wesley and Fabian. You got all those guys back. Defensively, we talk about the front 7 being maybe one of the best Georgia Southern's ever put out there. It doesn't seem like it's resulting in that on the field.
Sure. Well, I think if you look at and I thought, again, that they had a good scheme what Arkansas State was trying to do. Arkansas State tried to take the front 7 out of it by their scheme. They really did. They tried to make sure that everybody was in the move and lateral. And when you have guys with size and those kind of things, sometimes those things hurt you. We should have been able to make some adjustments earlier on to what we were doing in those looks. Some of them do come back to inexperience. Some of it comes back to secondary linebackers and not having our eyes in the right place and getting the look that we want to be able to get. When you sit there and you go back to the offensive part, we've got to be able to run the ball. That's what this place is. It's what it's made up of. And right now we've got to be able to have better answers. Some of it comes back to you look up and you do have people that are skillful at the quarterback position, at the running back position, but sometimes we look up in our efforts to try to make sure that we're running the ball. Sometimes we're running into account that there's an extra guy. Sometimes we're running into account that's got 2 extra guys, because we are trying to make sure that we run it. And we've got to be able to look at those things and make sure that we're doing the right thing each week.
Early in the season, we asked you about who's going to be calling the plays defensively, who's going to be calling the plays offensively. You weren't sure. How is that working out? Is that fluid? Are you week to week, game to game, changing that, or
No,
is it always the same?
If I remember correctly, I think I answered it more with how the game planning goes, and so at the end of the day, we've had this kind of the same prognosis and the same organization each week, and that's what we'll continue to keep it. It stays consistent through everything that we've done. That hadn't changed with who's, how we organize and how we run practice, and that doesn't change based on how we sit there and go to the back end. It stays the same.
Well, who's doing that right now?
Well, it becomes the coordinators.
Okay. Do you feel comfortable with the play calling? I mean, do you feel like at any point that's something that you have to step into, or do you feel good about
the play calling piece? Yeah. Well, there's certainly going to be things, no matter where you are, no matter what it is, that you sit there and you come back and you've got to be able to talk and communicate with and make sure that you're on the same page with before the games ever happen. A lot of times there are going to be 4 or 5 plays, whether it's positive or negative. It doesn't have to be a negative to be able to ask questions about what a thought process is to make sure that myself and the play callers are on the same page, and that works really with all 3 phases in what we're doing. When we sit there and go through it through the week, we've got to do a better job of me making sure that I'm giving all 3 of those staffs a better idea and making sure they know that what I want exactly out of each week. And I've got to do a better job of those things, and I can't sit there and fault those guys for that.
Got Georgia Tech this week. They've been circling this game for a couple years. Just like we mentioned about Western Michigan, Georgia Southern came back and gave them quite a scare a couple years ago. Paul Johnson coached here. We know what they've been able to do in the past. Your thoughts on playing Tech, and what do you expect out of it?
Well, I think it's a cool game. I mean, I don't know what a different way of being able to say it. Like you said, the history between Paul Johnson, obviously haven't been here, Mike Seawalk haven't been here, both former head coaches of Georgia Southern that had a good bit of success. And then, being able to take all these ties from guys in the state. It's certainly a P5 opponent, it's an in-state opponent, somebody right down the road from what we play. I do think that there's a lot of tradition that kind of overlaps between the 2 places, and so we're looking forward to the opportunity. Obviously, Georgia Tech's a talented football team, and has played in some tight games. I know that they haven't had necessarily the success they'd like to the last week or 2, but they played as well as anybody can. They do a good job on offense, obviously, with Coach Johnson and the staff that he's really had for my guess would be outside of 1 or 2 adjustments. He's had the same group for about 25 years, defensively. Obviously Ted Roof, having played there, the success that he was able to have as both an assistant coach, coordinator, guy that's been a head coach in the ACC, and is now back as a defensive coordinator, doing a fantastic job with the defense. So we're looking forward to the opportunity.
When you're playing that offense, discipline comes into play over and over again.
Sure.
Last week it seemed like there might have been some lack of discipline, but lack of wrapping up, getting to the ball. You can't do that this week, obviously.
Sure. Well, again, you brought it up, and it's something, first one of the things that jumps out. We try to sit there and talk about, and how we tackle and what we try to work on all the time. Y'all get an opportunity to see it when we come out here, and that's not what we did. We were sitting out there being unfundamental, diving at people's ankles, and eventually what happens when you dive at people's ankles sometimes, 1, you miss, 2, you take somebody else out, and that's what winds up happening to us on a 4th and 18, And that's not what we want to do. Like you said, when you're playing Georgia Tech, you got to play disciplined football, you got to play tough football, and you got to be able to get off blocks and get to the ball. Everybody's got an assignment, everybody's got a key, and same way you do with any type of offense, but this is certainly about being able to make sure that you're able to get push and that you're able to get off blocks and make sure that you're playing with your assignment. It's going to come down to the same things we talk about all the time. They're going to feel like that their edge and what they do is what they do offensively, and that edge is the toughness that the option brings with your entire program, not just the offense. And that's the edge they're looking for, and it's also the edge we sit there and feel like we've got to have this week to have some success.
Typically when you're playing Georgia Southern, you're going to try to shut down the run and make them throw.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that maybe people are going to start trying to do the opposite with you, try to make you run. Do you feel like you guys can be successful running the ball against Georgia Tech?
Yeah, I think we do, and again, that's what we've got to be able to do. And I don't, certainly as long as I'm here, I feel like we've got to be able to do what's going to give us the best opportunity to win and what's going to give us a chance to be successful. I think obviously as you look back at really 4 of our 5 games, we've been able to have some success throwing the ball with some efficiency. I thought that Kevin and the receivers did a nice job, and I thought the offensive line might have had their best week from a protection standpoint last week. But we've got to be able to sit there and do both. We've said that from day one since December 26th of being here. We've got to be able to do both. They did it well last week, and But again, we look up, and when we get our touchdowns last week, they're both off explosive plays. You see a big play, really by Miles making something happen after he catches it for a long a long pass and run afterwards, and then you're talking about a big play by LA, and really good job by the offensive line and the tight ends in that picture. So again, we've got to be able to do both, and we've got to be able to find a way to turn those field goals into points and making them touchdowns, and that prevents us from being able to run them out earlier.